the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if that sounds like something that you want to listen to on the reg, go over to the A to Z Sports Nashville, the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple, Spotify. When you get there, rate, review, but most importantly, subscribe. If you do subscribe, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. And speaking of Mondays, it is one right now, the snowiest Monday of my life, maybe. But it is one right now at 5 p.m. Typically, we're on at 7 p.m., but there's playoff games and there's stuff. I got something to do tonight, and so we are just a couple hours early, but we are normally at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 o'clock tonight. But we are live on the A to Z Sports Nashville YouTube channel. And you can come hang out with us and be a part of the show there on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and then you'll get notifications for when we go live. And you can leave your comments, and we love to respond and go back and forth with the folks that watch the show. It's always a ton of fun. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports National, and A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that Zach writes on the internet. It's been a weird day. There was a winter storm warning all of yesterday leading up to today in Knoxville. And, you know, if you've grown up in Knoxville like I have, I'm essentially a lifer, born in Nashville, lived here since I was 6 or something. You know, you kind of write that off. You go like, yeah, we'll see. Yeah, fine. We'll deal with that tomorrow when it's a dusting. You know, you've probably grown cynical like I have. Well, as of right now, it snowed, I think 8+ inches. Probably going to get, I don't know, like a foot or something like that. It's supposed to snow for another few hours even now. It's absolutely just coming down. And so here we are, and it's trapped inside. And Zach, you've just gotten rain. So what's up, man?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here looking at your snow, looking at this snow in this Buffalo-Pittsburgh game, and very fortunate that I'm not in that situation because little snow's all right, but it can get pretty cumbersome after a few hours, a couple of days or so, and you just want it gone. I'm ready for those 65 degree, 70 degree spring days already.
Come on down, spring. We need you. Because I am already so fed up. I'm not a winter snowbird. I'm not a nothing. I'm a get this snow out of here because I just want to be able to, you know, drive my car on a clean street, I guess. But yeah, because this really, it's now gonna freeze, like hard freeze. It's supposed to get down to like single digits the next couple days, which means this isn't gonna be out of here for Lord knows how long. At least 2 days, if not more. And so, yeah, tons of fun here in Knoxville. I think there's one snowplow in Knoxville, something like that. Because, I mean,
have they got your street yet?
Oh, heck no. I do live off of a main drag here in Knoxville. But no, I mean, these ancillary roads, it is up past your ankles now when you go out there and step out. It's really wild. Although you could be Elias here in the comments. He says, dang, we got 5 hours of sleep here. That is so much worse. Holy cow. And then it freezes tonight and it's just like a sheet of ice on the road.
Which no one can drive on. No one.
Yeah, that doesn't exist. Like, yeah, I mean, I got a 4-wheel drive car. I could probably make it to a grocery store right now. Like, it would be a slow go. There's a decent chance we slide off the road into a tree, but like the sleet and ice, like absolutely not. So no envy there. That is for sure. But this isn't a snow podcast. It kind of is tonight. I guess this is the snowcast, snow edition of the Big Orange Podcast. But we're going to talk about Tennessee sports, football, and basketball, of course. I think there's been a few things that we have to cover first. I was going to say, I mean, this is obviously all about Tennessee, but we got to start off by talking about who Alabama hired, what that means for Tennessee, and the fact that Tennessee picked up a former Alabama player in the transfer portal, which is really exciting. Going to talk about all of that. Tennessee played 2 games on the basketball court this week. Won 1, lost 1. We're going to discuss all of that. And the Lady Vols lost yesterday. That's probably not going to spend a segment on this, but there's that hanging out there.
It might be time.
There's that hanging out there also. Oh, geez. Eric, he says, I was held up for over an hour on 40 while they cleared a multi-car wreck. I saw there was a tractor trailer that jackknifed across 40 and shut down 40. Of course, 40 runs directly through Knoxville for the uninitiated there.
You're getting into Survivor Man scenarios there where you're starting to wonder, how long am I going to be here?
Yes.
what do I have to eat?
So, I mean, just in my every neighborhood around here in Knoxville, I mean, it's all just hills where it's hills until you get to the mountains, and there was a guy just out here. He's probably doctor or a nurse or something. And I watched him struggle to get up a hill continuously. He just kept trying. Then he got out. He had scrubs on. I was like, oh man, he's probably like trapped at the hospital till just now, having to get home. He was in a little sedan. Had to just leave it at the bottom of the hill. And that's right outside my door here. So yeah, a lot of fun. Tons of fun with the snow. Although I do, hopefully the kids are having a good time sledding around. That is actually fun. But that's going to be the show tonight. Let's get right to it. Right after, of course, I tell you about the great folks at Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau Health Plans have been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200 plus locations across the state. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Make sure you go and you visit them when you need your health plan next. Farm Bureau. They're great. Sponsor the show for a really long time. All righty. So the big news this week, of course, was the retirement of Nick Saban. We had a quick segment about it last week and just talked about, who they might hire. Of course, we brought up the guy that they ended up hiring. And we sort of talked about what does it mean for Tennessee going forward. And a lot of that is also going to be ironed out with what happens in the transfer portal to Alabama too. And, how many decommits they have from their recruiting class, yada, yada. But they ended up hiring Washington's Kalen DeBoer. He had only been there for 2 years, made it to the national title game. We speculated. We were kind of like, I don't know that I see the motivation. But then after you think about it, Michael Penix was gone. And that fairy tale run's probably over. And it was a strike while the iron's hot situation. It's extremely risky if you are Kalen DeBoer. He's going to get paid, no doubt. And especially, if he gets fired, I'm sure he has some sweet buyout. But it's an interesting hire. It's a good hire for Alabama, but it's an interesting hire for Kalen DeBoer, being willing to put his neck out on the line. But let's start there before we get into the Tennessee implications. Zach, what do you think of that hire?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised too. I thought he would stay kind of out west. I didn't necessarily think his personality, not that I know a lot about Kalen DeBoer. Obviously, we don't follow Washington football as closely as we do Tennessee football, but most of the time it seems like those guys kind of stay out that way, like Chris Peterson for years. Brian Harsin came from Boise State and did not work out at all at Auburn. Sarkisian was out there for a while before he finally made it to the SEC, just kind of had to because of his situation. So I was surprised on that aspect, but at the same time, Kalen DeBoer is similar to Josh Heupel in a lot of ways. They're both from South Dakota, grew up about 90 minutes from each other. DeBoer even went and learned some from Josh Heupel in the mid-2000s when Heupel was at Oklahoma, and Heupel, they didn't really know each other, but Heupel let him come down and sit in on quarterback meetings and ask questions and kind of learn about his offense. So, he's obviously pulled a little bit from Heupel and kind of that Mike Leach tree dating back. So there's a lot of similarities there. I think there's a lot of similarities too in the way they run their program. Very family culture type deal, good environment, positive vibes, that type of thing. So that'll be a sharp contrast to to what we've seen at Alabama over the last 15 years. It'll be interesting to see how that transition works. How many players stay, how many players go. I'm not ready to say he totally won't work out. I mean, it's just too early to suggest that. And also because his profile is very similar to Heupel's, and for pro Heupel, you can't knock this guy for the same things that have made Heupel successful. It's intriguing. I mean, it has. I think there's a high ceiling potential there. If his offense works, if he can recruit, that's obviously a huge part of it. Doesn't have a lot of SEC experience. He was keeping Robert Gillespie on staff, who was a former Vols assistant, who oddly enough was apparently spreading some rumors about the reason Tennessee pulled Michael Penix's offer back in the day that Jeremy Pruitt had to clear up before the championship game. And he also is bringing Nick Sheridan along with him, who was on his staff at Washington, was a graduate assistant at Tennessee for 3 years. So he'll have a little bit of SEC experience there, but it's a different world. Recruiting at Washington and Alabama is two completely different worlds. And Alabama's a huge brand. I mean, some of the Tennessee is a huge brand. Georgia, that these schools recruit themselves to an extent, but now more than ever with NIL, transfer portal stuff, like you kind of are committing to a coach because you're committed to a situation, and his situation's unknown. So I don't know that he's going to land 5-star guys right off the bat just because he's at Alabama. Like they got to know what they're getting into.
Yeah, I think the talking point of it doesn't matter, Alabama will recruit itself. No, like, that's not true. Like unless he shows something that goes against just the general, what you see at other jobs. So much of that has to do with the coach. And you look at that, and maybe the fact that Saban's going to hang around the program helps. But I mean, kids were going there for Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer has won exactly 0 national championships. And he can go in and point at the trophies that Nick Saban won, but at the end of the day, the kid coming in has no idea at this point, has no idea what Kalen DeBoer is going to do it as the coach at Alabama. And something that went untalked about this entire season, they were great. That offense was really great. Michael Penix was incredible. And I think DeBoer did a really good job coaching them. But something that didn't get talked about is that Washington team almost lost to Arizona State, to Stanford, to, I want to say, maybe they did beat Arizona, but there was a couple more where they got
USC
Washington
game was pretty
State
close, and USC was not a good team last year.
Yes, really the one, and this is the one that I actually watched. But Washington State, they nearly lost that game. But Washington State was not good this year, and so you watch that and you kind of wonder, okay, does he have a little bit of coaching down to your competition? Because this was he had some really amazing seasons at the D2 level, wherever he was. And then in FBS ball.
Yeah, he went from there to Fresno State.
From that,
Sioux Falls. That's
Sioux Falls. And that was, he was like total powerhouse there. And then went to Fresno State, was good at Fresno State, got that Washington job. But this was the first big boy great season he's had. And in a number of those games was living by the skin of his teeth. But at the same time, you look at that, and Saban, he had won a national title, but he had not been that insanely dominant how he ended up being in Alabama. He had not been like that before. But you look at the law of averages and you say, what has been the more common outcome with a coach? The fact that they come in and blow the doors off like Saban, or they come in and they're either or they're bad. And it's the meh and bad way more often than it is ever the national championship runs. And especially the main thing is the sustained national championship.
Well, and nobody's going to do what Saban did again. I mean, Kirby Smart has a chance, but I don't think it's going to be really hard. It's going to be a lot harder for Kirby, even with Saban gone, just because of the new landscape of college football. You can't, I mean, Nick Saban recruited at a high level. There was no portal for most of his success. You had to sit out a year. You couldn't, transfer in conference. There was so much there that worked against or that helped him keep guys in his system. And like Reggie Bush kind of threw some shade, and I don't completely agree with Reggie Bush because, Nate Saban's a great coach, and his players that played for him pretty much, speak glowingly of him. But he was able to do kind of what he pleased because the athletes had no power. I mean, they couldn't leave. They were locked in unless they wanted to go sit out a year or drop down, to the FCS level for a year. They had to go with what Saban wanted and the way he ran his program. And the style of coaching now is more towards a Josh Heupel style. I mean, Kirby's still getting by with it and winning now, but the depth that Saban was able to build, he was starting to lose some of that. And so I don't think anyone, even if they're an elite coach on Saban's level, is going to have that kind of success moving forward. There's just no way to string together that amount of championships, especially with the playoff expanding. More and more parity is going to be coming to the sport. More teams have a chance. The portal makes it so easy to turn Florida State into an almost playoff team. It just it I it, people in Alabama are going to want that, and it's just not. Even if he is everything they wanted him to be coach wise, I don't see him ever coming close to what Saban accomplished.
No, I don't see anybody ever being able to do that again, especially with NIL and the transfer portal. That's such a game changer. As far as, I mean, you're kind of saying it there. As far as keeping talent around, players can now just play this system and go, hey, this year at Georgia was fun. I'm gonna go over here now, and they can essentially hop around. They can find their market value, and try to go get paid somewhere else, and try to find a team. Oh, the safety room at Georgia stacked. Well, I'm gonna go to this school that has no safeties, get a giant paycheck, be the starter there. There's so much more consideration there than there ever has been in the past, and it makes all these other schools so much more competitive in terms of getting their top line guys. And then it takes Georgia's always going to have those top line guys as long as Kirby's there.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Well, he's the dude can recruit. I mean, there's no doubt about that. He gets his guys. Yeah.
Yeah. But the depth, it is the depth that
it's
is
a lot
just
harder now.
So hard to keep around for absolutely everybody. And it's what I've always wanted, because the parity is just so much more fun when you can get more of a college basketball style thing where you get a tournament where sort of anybody can win. That's just what a much more compelling product that would be.
It's absurd to think about the amount of active college coaches that have a national championship to their name. And if Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL, he interviewed with the Chargers today, that's one less that exists still. It's still down to what, Dabo, Kirby Smart, who else? That's the list is pretty short there. Matt Brown, is still hanging around there at UNC. There aren't many active college coaches that have won a championship, and that's insane. Like, on one hand, you can count. In college basketball, it's the complete opposite, of course. So the sport needs more parity just for the health of it. Nobody wants to see these teams dominate for an 8-year stretch and then they finally get knocked off, and then another team kind of steps in. Like, we've seen that from kind of the USC to Florida to Alabama and now to Georgia. It's tough.
It really is. And so going back to DeBoer and in relation to Tennessee, it's almost hard for me to envision any scenario that doesn't involve them having a decent drop off. And it's going to be completely just unavoidable. Obviously, they already lost 2 5-star wide receivers, a number of guys into the transfer portal, including their number one wide receiver. I don't know why wide receiver is getting hit so hard, but two wide receiver recruits, Isaiah Bond, their best up and coming wide receiver, and so it is just hard to imagine that they won't have a decent drop off. Now, DeBoer, what will be really interesting is that there is a scenario. It's hard to just say one way or another about a thing like this, but there is a scenario where DeBoer was kind of living off of Michael Penix Jr. Yeah. And he's actually not that good of a coach, and he doesn't have the recruiting piece because he's from the West Coast, and it's Brian Harsin at Auburn, where it's just a really terrible fit, and it just never should have happened in the first place. And Now, that would be every single puzzle piece falling into place for Tennessee fans, for Georgia fans, for, the entirety. I mean, let's be honest, the entirety of college football wants that to happen. We all want to see the downfall of Bama,
You
except
know,
for Bama fans.
in that scenario, he goes like 7-5 in year 2, and Nick Saban coaches the bowl game. Like that's what happens. The Music City Bowl. Please, please, I
Please
want to see
no.
Nick Saban on the sidelines of the Music City Bowl so bad. Please.
No. But yeah, you probably that is probably what would happen. It would be a Phil Fulmer. Here comes Phil. He's
Yeah.
coming to save the day.
Somebody did that. Somebody I think that happened at Wisconsin, maybe Barry Alvarez, maybe at one point did
Yes,
that,
that
I
is
think.
exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that happening for sure.
No, I think there is a real non-zero chance that this is not complete, because complete disaster is probably far-fetched, but going, only winning 9 games, that's complete disaster. That's complete disaster for Alabama. Nick Saban won 12, 11 games a year. And
Yeah, yeah.
so a 9-win season is disaster.
An 11-win season was a letdown for Alabama. I
Yes.
mean, that's really hard to live up to, and the fact that they could maybe go 9-4, like Tennessee has to beat Alabama. We talked about this before. They have to beat Alabama at home next season. Saban's gone. They're losing a lot of players, from the portal. They're still going to have talent. DeBoer's a good coach. It's his first year in the SEC. Like, you cannot lose that game. And there's going to be a few teams on Alabama's schedule that view that game the same way. I don't know who all they play next season with the new SEC schedule, but I'm sure. I think they played Texas or Oklahoma won, I'm sure.
Texas, I think they have to go
Both
to Texas.
Yeah, both of those teams will, that they'll be expecting to beat Alabama. So, 9-4 in his first season is a very, very realistic scenario. And I don't know what the reaction is going to be. You'll have some Alabama fans that are reasonable, that are like, okay, it's his first year. You still have to build this thing. It's not like inheriting, no offense to Kirby Smart, it's not like inheriting the situation he inherited in 2016 when he took over from Mark Richt, and that was a pretty good roster that had been winning 9-10 games a year, no less than like 8, even in a down year that program was on solid ground. This is, you don't kind of know what the roster is going to look like. I mean, they might have a bunch of people go through spring practice and not like what they see from DeBoer and hit the portal at the end of April. That's probably, they're going to lose a few then too, probably.
I just know that whatever the worst case is, that's what I want to see. I want to see
Oh yeah,
the disaster happen. Let it implode. That's all I need. Just send Alabama back down to the old Mike Price days. Because boy, that was fun back then, wasn't it? When, how many did Fulmer win in a row? 6 or something?
I'll just take Mike Shula days, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
anything is not saving.
It was, they were not good back then, and of course the Alabama fans now that all became fans since 2007 don't remember any of that. But Alabama sucked.
That's so. Yeah, I mean, the fact that they could have hired Rich Rodriguez, I guess at the end of whenever that was, 2006, and been terrible. He did not work out at Michigan. Obviously, that completely fell apart on him. And Richard, he's languishing at Jacksonville State or something now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Alabama would have been a disaster. I mean, they could have went on a downfall like Tennessee. It's all about getting that one hire right. And, Tennessee got theirs wrong in the late 2000s, and Alabama got theirs right. And that's really kind of what separated their trajectories that we've seen over the last 15 years, is that one hire. And it's so hard to get them right, though. And that's the other thing about this DeBoer hire, is that everybody wants a Saban. Everybody wants a Kirby Smart or a Dabo or somebody that can come win a couple national championships. There are so very few of those guys that exist. And the chances of hiring one of those guys is very, very slim. So, maybe he turns into that, but the odds suggest that he won't.
I agree. And before we move on, to talk about the transfer portal in Tennessee, because Tennessee got a player from Alabama in the transfer portal. I did think it was really funny this week. All the Alabama fans, whatever PR nonsense came out, the Alabama athletic department let leak whatever information, and they said DeBoer flew to Washington the day Saban retired, which it's Greg Byrne flew to Washington the day
Yeah.
Saban retired, which let's be clear, that did not happen. That's not what occurred. I mean, maybe it did, but no, don't believe. Let's take it from those who know, from Tennessee fans. You didn't hire the guy they wanted. That didn't happen. You never do. You never hire the guy they actually wanted at the beginning. That has happened like once in the history of college football. Nobody.
Yeah, that was like Lincoln Riley, maybe
It was
because he was already
Scott Frost at Nebraska. That was the one.
yeah. Maybe
The
Kirby
one
at Georgia. I mean, there's a few situations
maybe, yeah.
where it just works because it's set in place. But you're right. I mean, you don't get 2 days of coaches announcing that they're staying if that's not what's happening. Because if it is what's happening, you get your job. Because once it was, oh, they're talking to DeBoer, it was hours. Within hours, the hire happened. I mean, yeah, obviously we have a lot of experience when it comes to this type of stuff, but definitely I would imagine Dan Lanning, top of their list, SEC experience, Steve Sarkisian, top of their list. SEC experience as an assistant, beat Alabama, and the Mike Norvell one I never really understood because I still think that guy's a lot of fool's gold. I think he got lucky with some portal stuff and had a good quarterback and some good transfer players. I don't really believe in that guy long term, and I don't think he would have worked out at Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, Lanning made real sense.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that.
I love that he stayed though. I think that's awesome that he stayed at Oregon. Like, we need more of that. Like, go build something and stay where you can have success long term and you can weather an 8-5 season, because those do happen sometimes. Like we saw with Tennessee this season. I didn't lose any faith in Heupel because they went 9-4. It was just a situation with the talent they lost. It's the ebbs and flows of college football. Saban's kind of ruined that for the rest of us because fans think that's not supposed to be how it works. But stay somewhere where you can get through a couple of, a season or two like that and get back on top, because it can happen. We saw with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. They stuck with him after 4-8, and he took that program back to where it was before that.
Yes, I did like seeing that, and I just, Alabama fans were like, "Oh, he flew out there the day Saban retired. He was hired by that night," and that's not what happened. That's the fantasy that they want you to believe happened. And every athletic department sends out whatever information that is. They leak it to those guys that like live in the facility. The 247, the rivals guys, they leak it out to those dudes, and they'll say whatever the athletic department wants.
Danny White, the deal with Tony Elliott, this past season when he quoted my tweet about Elliott, saying it wasn't the right time. We don't know if there were numbers exchanged or what happened, but Tony Elliott was the name for like 36 hours in that Tennessee coaching search, and none of us wanted that to be the outcome. But there were some obvious conversations that happened there, and they were very interested in him. So, I mean,
absolutely,
we all get it. You hire who you hire. It doesn't really matter all that stuff beforehand. I don't, Tony Elliott, it wouldn't have been a good situation for him. It would have been awful for Tennessee. It would have been awful for him too. So, he should be happy it worked out the way it did.
Yeah, thank goodness that happened the way that it did, and here we are. And speaking of where we are. Now, Tennessee grabbed a transfer tight end from Alabama, but then at the same time has not heard, no pun intended, has not heard anything from Lance Hurd, who is the offensive line transfer from LSU that obviously kind of everybody is looking to get his services. And so let's discuss that right after I tell you about the great folks at BetterHelp. Yeah, there's a graphic right there. if you're a Tennessee fan like myself or Zach, you know how many years the Big Orange have shaved off your life with the emotional roller coaster of college sports, or maybe the roller coaster of life is messing with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals. Regardless, if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human being going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a different way. And that's where our sponsor, BetterHelp, comes into play. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And it's an important mission because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to just the options in your area. BetterHelp's platform makes finding a therapist easier because it's online and remote, and BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. Plus, with our link, betterhelp.com/ATOZ sports, you get 10% off your first month. So see a therapist because maintaining your mental health is just as important as your physical health. This football season, check out betterhelp.com/ATOZ sports and save 10% on your first month with BetterHelp. Big thanks to them for sponsoring the show. Now, there has essentially been no movement on the Lance Hurd situation. He was supposedly going to commit last week. There was reports and rumors on message boards and things that, oh, this is a done deal. They got their guy for the offensive line, and Lord knows Tennessee needs him. And the kid from Mississippi State ended up going to Auburn, I believe. And so that's off the table. I mean, this is a push your chips to the middle of the table type of situation for Tennessee because you need this guy or frankly a guy. Like, that's really the situation that you're in. If he ends up not committing to Tennessee, you still got to find somebody. And they haven't. What have you heard on the situation, Zach?
I mean, it seems like radio silence from everyone involved, still kind of expecting good news, hoping for good news, because the Mississippi State kid that they were also looking at is transferred elsewhere. So he's off the market. I guess you can always decommit, and we have seen some of that. Missouri lost a commitment from a transfer player today that had transferred from Alabama. But I don't know. I mean, I hope it's kind of like we said before, that maybe this is a situation where he just wants to show up to campus and just be the guy without some huge announcement. Maybe, I mean, that has happened a few times in the past. Maybe that does happen. I don't know, but it is kind of getting worrisome because you really need to get that position locked down before spring practice. You really need an interior offensive lineman as well. So you really need two spots along that offensive line.
Yes.
I'd love, there's a Washington guard that hit the portal, today or yesterday as well, that started every game for them. That would be nice to have. And I'm sure Alabama would probably be the front runner for him considering the coaching change. But man, throw some NIL money at that kid and bring him in, let him play left guard, and you've got a sure thing there, especially if you can get Hurd. You do wonder if maybe the whole left tackle, right tackle thing is a bit of a holdup here, which I kind of talked about my feelings on that last week during the show. That's just absurd on so many levels. You got to go through spring practice to even have an idea of which kid's better on which side and what works better for the offensive line. I really hope that's not the holdup, because that could potentially cause some problems with John Campbell or Hurd, either one there. So I think they still, end up getting this kid. I think he's going to end up at Tennessee. But until it actually happens, there's kind of that nervous feeling of what if it doesn't,
Yeah, and I mean, we said it could be a situation where he does just show up and he was in the boat and he just didn't make a big announcement and a whole whoop-de-doo about it. But that doesn't happen very often. It does happen, but it's few and far between. So it is a dire situation, and well, it seems like a dire situation from the outside because Tennessee just needs this guy so badly for this position. I mean, if you don't get him, this is the thing that could torpedo you in the coming season, is having no protection for Nico. It's just such a fundamental part of this offense. So I'm interested to see how it turns out, and I'm also feeling like, okay, let's wrap it up. Let's make that happen. And
the larger conversation is, going into year 4, of the Heupel and Glenn Ellerbe era here, and this isn't really a slight at Heupel because it's or maybe it is, I don't know, but you should be developing some internal options at this point. And they just
Yes.
really haven't anywhere on the offensive line yet at any of the positions. It's either guys they inherited or transfers. And that's been frustrating. And maybe they've just missed on a couple guys. And they didn't really have a lot of depth when they took over. So there weren't a lot of options. You've got some nice additions in this last class. Bennett Warren looks like he could be a real stud. I mean, obviously they can coach the guys. Darnell Wright played better after Heupel and Ellerby got here. Campbell and Mincy have played pretty well at times. Crawford's played good enough. The guys that you've put out there have played well, but the guys that you kind of had to, bring up from scratch, from the high school level, you just haven't been able to get them there. And you should have some of those options by now. It just really feels like you should. So that just kind of adds to this because you got to fix this long term. You can't be going year to year on transfer players. It's tough for continuity. It goes totally against what Josh Heupel wants to do with this program. It's not the way he wants to build it. He'll do what he has to do. Obviously, I mean, they're trying to find a solution to a problem by going through the portal, which is what we all want them to do. But man, you gotta find a center from inside the program to replace Cooper after next season. You're gonna have to start developing some guards and tackles too.
Absolutely. I don't know what will happen there, but let's just have something happen soon. Even if it is just getting turned down, okay, move on. You got to get somebody, and then probably somebody additional in spring or somebody else that's out there. But that's really that with her, just because there really isn't any information. But Tennessee did get a commit from Miles Kitzelman from Alabama. He was a player who transferred to Alabama from Hutchinson Community College. He was a JUCO kid, goes to Alabama. Really didn't play much last year. I think he's a junior, but has multiple years of eligibility remaining. And maybe it probably is more of a depth piece for what Tennessee is looking at, because you got to think the guy from Notre Dame and Ethan Davis are probably your starters there, and your main guys at tight end, depending on how well they play and block and how everything goes there. But Ethan Davis, a very highly touted recruit who's looked like he's got some serious talent, and just his time hasn't come yet. And then this Holden Stays from Notre Dame. I think he's already showed, okay, I can play at the D1 level, and is kind of presumably the guy there. So it's an interesting pickup. Obviously, like taking anything from Alabama at this point, it's nice to just siphon off their guys, even if they're just depth pieces. But yeah, this is a good one, if for no other reason than it was Alabama. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I think it's a really smart kind of under the radar ish addition, because I do think it's mostly for depth. Holden Stays and Ethan Davis are your guys. They love Ethan Davis. The coaching staff loves him. Super high upside. Really excited to see how Heupel can use Ethan Davis in the offense. Maybe some different looks that we haven't really seen yet from the tight ends, just because of his athletic ability and what he can do as a receiver. But this program plays two tight ends pretty much all the time. I mean, you saw it with Princeton Fant and Jacob Warren last season with Jacob Warren and McAllen Castles. So you have to have some depth there, because even if, Ethan Davis ends up being a star, Holden Stays gets hurt, you got to have somebody that can step up into that role. You bring this kid in from Alabama, it just protects you against something like that happening, which obviously is unpredictable, right? I mean, we saw Keenan Peely, Brew McCoy, Kamal Haddon. You never know when some of these freak injuries can happen. It's totally out of your control. So bringing in this type of player is really smart. It wasn't something that we were really talking about as like a big need, like, oh, they need to go get another tight end. And it's tough too, because it's hard to bring in a depth piece at this point, in the portal era, because you don't want to run off Ethan Davis. You just brought this guy in from Notre Dame. You can't promise this guy a starting job necessarily either. So it's really hard to bring in those types of players. I mean, we've seen it at the quarterback position, where it's almost impossible, at least for Tennessee, to bring in somebody to kind of fill in a depth role. It's hard at pretty much every position, honestly, at this point, because players just kind of see what's going to happen in game one. They don't think about the entire season. Who thought Elijah Herring was going to play as much as he did last season? So many situations that like that end up happening. You never know when you might need this guy. I thought it was a pretty solid ad.
I agree. And so it shores up that position, which is nice. And you need that at every position. We already talked about just the transfer portal in general just hurts everybody's depth, including Tennessee. Obviously, the big one right there is the offensive line. And the tight end is a little bit offensive line. And well, not even a little bit. It's a pretty decent amount of offensive line there. But it's great pickup for that position, but you do, regardless of that, you just still have that specter out there of you need this offensive lineman, and that's not going to go away until you hear one way or another about Hurd. So that's really that with the transfer portal. Was there anything else with football, Zach, before we move on to talk about the old basketballs having an up and down week?
I think otherwise it was pretty quiet, which it should be in January outside of the portal kind of stuff. But otherwise, pretty much status quo for Tennessee football right now.
Yeah, I think I like it to just be. I don't need to hear anything until something good happens. then I can hear whatever. But there's that with football. Now, basketball traveled to Mississippi State and lost. That was not great. Then you go to Georgia and you are down by 11 points with 6 minutes to go in that game. And Dalton Connect steps in. And Tennessee ends up winning that game. Let's talk about what happened in that one right after I tell you about Zen Sports. We've been talking about Zen Sports all season long here on the old Big Orange podcast. It's the new sports betting app exclusively in Tennessee. But now, when you sign up for a Zen Sports account, you will receive up to a $1,000 no danger first wager. That's right. When you place your first bet in Zen Sports, you can be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $1,000 maximum if that bet loses. But there's even more good news. Zen Sports is rolling out its brand new VIP rewards program. With VIP rewards, they allow top-tier customers to earn more bonuses, comps, and perks, but the VIP program is by invite only. So if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for VIP consideration, check out the program details at zensports.com/VIP. No other sportsbook will offer you a premier sports betting experience with 24/7 top-tier customer support and faster withdrawals like Zen Sports. What are you waiting for? Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. That is Zen Sports. Betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. That is in sports. So as far as basketball went this week, it is odd. I was feeling pretty confident about both of these games, and both of them turned out differently than I thought they would, because I thought Tennessee would go into Mississippi State, clamp down. Tolu Smith is a really powerful piece that they have, and this was his first start back. He had played some, kind of getting acclimated, but this was his first full-blown start back. And I just thought, this is a great setup for Tennessee to just clamp down defensively, even if they don't have a great day shooting the ball, which they did not. 22 points in the first half. Even if they don't have a great day shooting the ball, the defense will clamp down and make this one a win for Tennessee. They've done well in Starkville under Barnes. And it was just a disaster from the jump. Like I said, 22 points in the first half. Dalton Connect had 28, kind of got back on track. Zakai had a really nice game. But Adu disappeared. Adu disappeared both of these games. And that's really tough after a really nice performance last week. And it's just, when you look at the team and you go, every single piece working together, this is one of the best. Obviously, they were top 5 this week. This is one of the best teams in America. Could beat absolutely anybody, period. But when you just have such an important piece like the big man kind of opt out like that, things are bound to fly off the rails. Now, against Georgia, they also flew off the rails. Tennessee had a 14-point lead in the first half. Looked like they were just going to cruise. It was just going to be blowout town. And then Georgia comes storming back. Tennessee loses its head defensively. It looked like they started panicking. They really didn't have composure. They were just over pursuing on defense. They were jumping at every single fake. They were just at anything and everything. And of course, Georgia was shooting like 90% from three or something. Like it was just absolutely ridiculous.
The
Nightmare
man bun
scenario.
kid.
Oh yeah, Kane, whoever that kid is, was just drilling threes against Tennessee. But then the final 5 minutes of this one, Tennessee clamped down that defense, played the way that we know that they could play, and the man, Dalton Connect, turned on those afterburners. Boy, he took over that game. Just clutch shots, great defense, because I definitely, if you can say anything about his game critically, his defense is not incredible all the time. He turned it on there, but so did everybody else. Santiago Vescovi had some really great defensive plays down that stretch. He made a really big three after having overall a pretty poor game. Scovey did, but hit a really important shot down the stretch. And then Dalton Connect drills a three to take the lead. And it really, I'm not sure they ever relinquished the lead after that. But it was an impressive closeout, and it showed. To me, it showed exactly what can make this team really powerful. They played a stinker like that. They just, nothing was working. And then you have that guy that you didn't have last year. That last year, that's a loss easily. Probably a pretty embarrassing one by a good number of points, because they were just running you off the floor, making threes. But Connect stepped in and changed the entire complexion of that game. And that's the X factor when he's on, and Adu can play well. And then you get decent play from the rest of the guys in the backfield. Backcourt. It's all there for this team, but they still have a lot of the same problems as last year, man. It's outside of Connect being that X factor, it's not a ton different, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah, I think there's good and bad, this week. Like you said, that's a game they lose last year. It's a game a lot of teams lose, to be honest, because the environment for Georgia was fantastic. That was kind of just Georgia's day, right? Like they weren't missing. A lot of times you lose those games and you walk out of it, you're like, it was just their night. Like they couldn't miss. What are you supposed to do? You're on the road. Those games happen. But like you said, they had Dalton Connect that could step up and be that guy that could absolutely score when they had to. And that's something that they missed last season. On the flip side, the Mississippi State loss, or really both games, like you kind of mentioned, Adu, after playing so well against Ole Miss, I mean, it's like that's what he can be. And Rick Barnes challenged him, and he showed up in that Ole Miss game. Then to not play at that level, like that's going to be what, like, you cannot do that in March and survive at all, because we've already seen kind of like the fatal flaw with this team. It's playing against dominant big men or good big men, not really even dominant, just good big men seem to be able to beat Tennessee. And that's, I mean, you can't, if something sinks this team in March, that will be it. And that is concerning at this point, because you just don't know at this point what you're going to get on a nightly basis.
Absolutely. You look at the record so far of this team: Zach Edey, loss; Tolu Smith, loss; Hunter Dickinson, loss; Armando Bacot, loss. That's 4 losses. They only have 4, but all 4 are against big guys. It is a glaring weakness, because Adu, when he's playing a team that he can really make moves against, this Tennessee's unstoppable. But when somebody brings a powerful big man in who can just kind of bully him, it's over. Like it just really, he struggles, and it seems like kind of gets in his own head, and that just can't happen. And if nothing else, when you're facing a stronger big man like that, like can we get Tobe Awaka to step up? Like Tobe Awaka should be a bully. That's something that I really like. When he has a nice game, it's really great, and he's a pretty good rebounder. But man, I just like it's right there with this team. Like you're so close to probably being the best team in America right now. Like just put these pieces together and be that team that beats Ole Miss by 40. And because I mean, Ole Miss turned right around and won a couple of games, I think. And so I believe they beat Florida, even if the game actually happens tomorrow, that's who Tennessee is set to play in Thompson Bowling. Uh, it's just so close, and that's the most frustrating thing when watching this team play. It's just like, oh, we're right there. You're right there, so close. And the consistency is, I don't know.
Yeah.
And Josiah Jordan James falling off. Scovey had a really nice few games falling off. Maybe they can put it all together here at the end. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's panicking at all. Like, it's just kind of like, okay, this is what's going on with the team. These are the flaws that the team has. Every team has some flaws. That Tennessee's not unique in that. It's just like, this is what they've got to kind of figure out to make that deep run. On the the good news is you don't want to peak in January. They're playing really well. They can be even better. I mean, that's a plus. And Rick Barnes has shown that he can get that high level of play out of Adu. Now you just got to get out of him consistently, and you need it in February, you need it in March, and hopefully into April. The early part of April, you're still playing. So it's not a sky is falling type situation at all because they lost to Mississippi State. It's just really like, hey, this is what they've got to figure out. This is how they can be even better. This is how they can be the best team in the country if they can figure it out. That's not a bad thing necessarily.
Ben says, Charlie, I thought you wanted this team to peak in January. First of all, you didn't want this team to peak in January. I don't think I've ever said that, but well, maybe that's kind of an overarching. Yeah, don't peak in January, sure, but also you have more goals than just be playing right at March. If that was the entire goal, you might not make the tournament. You got to play well before then, also, to make the tournament. And then, get there.
As good of a draw as possible. And they're still in that position. I mean, they're still in the number 1 seed kind of spot right there, right there. So,
Kansas went to UCF and lost. And then BYU went into UCF a couple days later and beat UCF. So, it's just going to be one of those years, like most college basketball years, where it's just wild.
Especially now, yeah, with the portal.
But I just want to see, like, that Mississippi State game, when you watch them play against Alabama, like, you just saw, oh, that's how it should have gone with Tennessee. Alabama made the shots at the end. They did what they had to do. They really, that Nelson kid for Alabama, you want to talk about a kid that's going to push around Jonas Adu. 1A right there. And that's not great because obviously you have to beat Alabama if you want to win this league. And that needs to be a goal also.
Saturday. That's coming up Saturday.
Yes. And you want to win the SEC on top of making it to the tournament with a good seed and playing your best ball in March. I mean, you have more goals than just making it to the tournament and making a run. And so the pieces are all there. Put the pieces together because first of all, don't freaking lose to Alabama. Don't lose to Florida. This is both of these back to back.
Alabama you might have some nice football recruits in that Alabama game too. So need a good environment there Saturday.
Yes, you got to bring it for more than just basketball there. They're just so close. Just put it together. Be that team. That's it. Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan. Everybody stay safe in this snow. Don't drive. Don't go outside and try to drive. You look at Twitter right now and it's like I-40 is back. We were just saying, somebody who was watching right back at the beginning, Eric. Yeah, he said he was on I-40 for an hour earlier due to a wreck. Don't be the person that's in that wreck in the snow if you don't have to. So everybody be safe. Thank you so much for watching. Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan. Anything else for the folks at home, Zach, before we bounce?
No, that should do it. Let's go watch the second half of this Bills-Steelers game. Maybe the Steelers can make a run and make this game interesting. Just half of these playoff games outside of the Lions game, Rams game last night have been stinkers. Yes. So make them compelling, please.
I hope so. All right. That's it. Thanks again to everybody who's been watching. We couldn't appreciate it more. Couldn't do it without you. Seriously. All right. We will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.